This is Living Healthy with Your Health Potential, where we explore your options for better health. Brought to you in association with The Woman in You.
Hi, welcome to Living Healthy. I'm your host, Sheryl Turgeon. As an adult, being a parent is one of the most complex roles we play, and the choices we make for our children can impact them for life. In this episode of Living Healthy, we talk with registered nurse Aurelie Cormier about nutritional, chemical, and environmental factors that affect the likelihood of diseases like cancer. With 35 years' experience as a nurse, specializing in oncology, Aurelie has worked in some of the finest hospitals in the country and has launched her website, beyondcancersurvival.com, to share information with families concerned about cancer. We talked with Aurelie at the Marion Institute's Connecting for Change event in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Here's what she had to say. I know at the Conference for Change you're really talking about parenting and cancer prevention. And I'm wondering, in terms of cancer prevention, if there is one number one factor that you could name that would prevent the development of cancer.
Well, that's pretty simple. It's really, if there's one message that people can get, and they've got it a zillion times, the best thing that we as parents could do to protect our children is just don't smoke and don't be around smoking. I mean, we've known that for a long time, but in what I see in my work every day, it's probably the best thing that anyone could do for not only their own health, but for the health of their children. And what we've learned through a lot of research is not only are we protecting our children, but we're protecting future generations.
Tell me more about that. Would it be the secondhand smoke that is also I know that's a carcinogen. Would that also affect the second generations?
Well, there's several things that we're learning about how cancers develop and how that plays out in our health over our lifetime. But one of the things that well, the first thing I need to say is that even today we still don't know why cancers develop. We're doing a lot of research on it. We are getting more information and we're getting better information. We know that oftentimes cancerous cells, there will be an initiator to a cancer developing, and then there'll be things within our environment, whether it's something in our food or a chemical, pesticide on the lawn, or because of our genetic background predisposes us to those things, that then the cancer can then progress. And
excuse me, when you say a cancer initiator, is it one of those environmental factors that is the initiator, or is there something in addition?
Usually it's, because our cells are growing and dividing so much, the neat thing is that our bodies are constantly growing and changing. And, every couple of days we have a new lining to our GI tract. Every month we have new bone marrow cells. Every 6 months we have new liver cells. And every 7 years we have a whole new body. So if we take really good care of ourselves today, we can actually be healthier 7 years from now than we are today. But because the cells are growing and changing all the time, and we do have genes that we're born with, and then as those cells grow and divide, we can also have mutations that develop during our lifetime. If we are exposed to things that could predispose to cancer in the setting of those particular genes that we have, then it may be easier for a cancer to develop. And because we do inherit certain genes and may be predisposed to them, There is another field of study that a lot of people are working on right now that's really exciting, called epigenetics. And what they're finding about epigenetics is that the genes that we have, because a lot of times they get, or our bodies and the tissues of our bodies and the cells of our bodies become imprinted during pregnancy while we're in our mother's womb, then at some point in our life or in some point in our children's life, there may be certain factors within our environment that then can turn those genes on or turn them off. And that may be the environment, it may be our diet, it may be medications that we're exposed to, or drugs, or it may be chemicals or the sun, the radiation of the sun, and that can lead to diseases that form in adulthood, whether that be heart disease, cancer, autoimmune diseases.
Now, the opposite can also happen. Isn't that correct? That epigenetics also means that through a healthy diet we can turn off those genes?
Yeah, there's certain conditions that can turn them on or turn them off. I think by eating a healthy diet, it gives our bodies a better chance of remaining as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And of course, there's no guarantees in all of this, because one of the things that I've come to learn over my life, especially my professional career of working with a lot of people who are very sick, is that life is very mysterious. We just never know how long we're going to be here. And there are patients that I have worked with that come in and they look so healthy, and yet they're so sick. And you think to yourself, how could this person who looks so incredibly healthy have this cancer?
Right.
It may not be, when we think about epigenetics, it may not be what they're doing in their lifetime. It may have been something that their grandfather was exposed to. Say their grandfather worked in World War II and was exposed to different chemicals or different radiation. That may have caused some sort of change in his genetic makeup that then, we've inherited as a grandchild, that then in certain conditions, then, it predisposes us more to certain diseases.
Right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It is fascinating, and that's, one thing that is a really exciting field right now, as there's a lot of researchers out there who are looking more and more into this area. Yeah.
And your major focus is really childhood, isn't that correct?
Well, I am a adult nurse. I also I've also been a clinical nurse specialist. I've been a nurse practitioner. I have worked with a lot of patients over the years. I've been a nurse actually for 35 years, 28 of those being in oncology. So my main specialty is adult cancers. But I think the thing that really keeps me going in this work is working with people that survive. And it's those who survive that I get really excited about. And I try to figure out what is it that they're doing that allows them to beat the odds, so to speak.
And what are some of the things that you've seen that seem to be a pattern?
Well, I think oftentimes these people take personal responsibility, and for trying to be as healthy as possible. And I have a patient that I worked with recently with lung cancer, and if you met her on the street, you would never know that this woman has lung cancer. You would never know she has any stress in her life at all, because she looks so incredibly healthy, and so, she looks like she's, having a wonderful life, and in many senses she is. But she does have this stress that she's dealing with of being treated for lung cancer, And this is something that she said to me recently, is she said, Aurelie, I want you to tell people this, because this is something that I learned, and I think it's really important for other people to hear. Mm-hmm. And she said when she was being treated for her lung cancer, along the way, she had a reoccurrence. And it really hit her that she was not going to be cured of this lung cancer. And she thought to herself, she said, you know what, I could just totally deny this and run away from it and just, keep doing what I'm doing, mm-hmm. or I could embrace it. And she chose to embrace it. And she said, by embracing it, what I did is I faced the reality, but I wanted to do everything in my power to be one of the outliers, one of the people who survived as long as possible with lung cancer. So every day she eats incredibly well, she mm-hmm. exercises, she meditates on a regular basis, and she wakes up every morning and she is so thankful to be alive. And I thought, isn't that fantastic? And here mm-hmm. she is, she looks so fabulous, mm-hmm. even though she's living with this lung cancer. And I thought, she's someone that we need to promote. Here's someone that's being really successful, and she doesn't consider herself a survivor. She considers herself surviving. And I think that was, yeah. I loved how she said that. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, this is someone that, is a good role model for others. And, so it's people like that I learned so much from. And I think it's those who are surviving, mm-hmm. and that we need to be studying, because we need to understand what is it that makes the difference in the mm-hmm. person that is having, who's really struggling with their cancer and dies, and those that survive.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking in terms of childhood exposures. Are there exposures that are particularly significant for a child in developing cancer?
This is another thing that we're starting to learn, mm-hmm. is that a lot of the diseases, including cancer, that we see in adulthood, we're starting to realize probably stem from childhood, because there appear to be critical periods of growth and development mm-hmm. that, either while from conception to about 3 years old, when the cells are dividing very rapidly, the body is growing and changing very quickly, when it's more prone to insults or mutations. Okay. Also during adolescence, the body again is growing and changing very quickly, and so every time a cell divides, it's at risk of mutation. And so these, and probably the person who's done the most research that I'm aware of about this is a man called David Barker, mm-hmm. who's an epidemiologist in England. And he actually wrote this beautiful book, Mothers, Babies, and Health in Later Life. And he looked at all the epidemiological research that he had in England, showing that it's factors during those critical periods of growth and development which then translate into heart disease, or really? Diabetes in adulthood. And so through that work, there is more research coming out about cancer. Mm-hmm. And a couple of the few studies that we started with to get a better understanding that some of these cancers actually develop mm-hmm. Or stem from pregnancy in utero were from the DES experience that we had and the thalidomide experience that we had. With DES, it was used for pregnant women to prevent miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And by around 1960, we realized that these children were being born, and at some point in their childhood or their adolescence, they went on to develop these very rare cancers. Mm-hmm. And there was a doctor at Mass General, actually, who had a cluster of patients with clear cell carcinoma of the vagina and the cervix that normally we never would have seen until women were in their 70s. And when he was treating one of the young girls, the mother had mentioned that she had taken DES in pregnancy. And so he started to ask every one of his patients, you know, if the mother had taken DES, and in fact they had. So then the correlation and the connection was there for how what happened during pregnancy then got translated into a cancer earlier in life.
In such a case, have they found anything that could disrupt the development of that cancer?
I really don't know if there is. I can tell you that when cancers get, you know, when a mutation occurs and that first cancerous cell is born, it doesn't necessarily mean that the cancers keep growing. There are cancers that can regress, and commonly you'll see this with women with cervical dysplasias, is they may develop a cervical dysplasia and then, you know, maybe their diet changes, or they are doing healthier things, or they have less stress in their life. There could be factors within their life, and then you'll have a regression of that dysplasia back to a normal cell.
So do children born to cancer survivors have a greatly increased risk of developing cancer themselves?
Well, I think the possibility is always there. It's something that I have found really interesting, so I'm always trying to figure out what is it that makes the difference for somebody.
What inspired you to go down this path of oncology?
I grew up in, I think there were several factors, but one is I grew up in a really beautiful town called Wellfleet on Cape Cod. And every summer, I remember, you know, growing up as a young child, 10, 11, 12 years old, you know, July would come and the helicopters would come and they'd be spraying the pesticides all over the marshes to try to take care of the greenheads that were bothering everybody at the beach. And we realized it wasn't helping totally, but somebody came up with the brilliant idea of a natural way to get rid of the greenheads that didn't involve pesticides. And what they discovered is greenheads are attracted to dark objects. So what they did is they developed these wooden boxes that they put in the middle of the marsh, and they had this wire mesh inside in the form of a tent. And what would happen is the greenheads would fly inside the box, they would fly up towards the light and the sun. They couldn't figure out how to get out, and so they would die inside the box. They would just, you know, die of exhaustion. They couldn't keep flying up and staying up.
By the way, we're talking flies here, right?
Yes, we're talking flies, yes. But, you know, I often thought to myself, what was that doing to my body? You know, all those pesticides, you know, every summer that we got exposed to. And then I, you know, became a nurse and, you know, started working with a lot of different patients and started gravitating towards those with cancer. And I, at one point, I was a clinical specialist in Stamford, Connecticut, and my role was to work with patients pre and post-op with any breast cancer or GYN cancer. And I also was co-directing the breast cancer support and GYN cancer support groups with the social worker. And it was a really vibrant group, incredible women. There was usually about 25 women that would come to every meeting. And one day, I remember in the group, they started talking about, they were looking around at each other and saying, look at how many young people are in this room. Why is it we all have cancer? And they said, it's got to be something in the environment. And I didn't say anything at the time, but I went home and I really absorbed that thought, and I started to think to myself, you know, they may have a point. That was in 1995. And I'm starting to believe more now that what they said has a lot of merit to it. And so I started, and then I also worked with a patient around that time who had a very advanced endometrial cancer. And her doctor, told her that she had a metastases. Her daughter was getting ready to get married and was going to get married, and this was in the summer. Her daughter was going to get married the following spring. And with the doctor's advice, the wedding got moved up to a couple, in the fall, so that the patient would know that she would be there for the daughter's wedding.
Yeah.
Miraculously, not only did the woman see her daughter's wedding, she went on to see her grandchild born a couple of years later and had no evidence of disease at the time of the grandchild's birth. And it struck me that, there was something there that helped this woman to survive.
Right.
And yet there was something that was also contributing to the cancers that we were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've worked with so many patients over the years. I've seen so much pain and suffering. And I started to think to myself, some of these cancers are preventable. If we get back to the smoking,
Mm-hmm.
that some of the cancers are preventable. And we put so much energy. We have one of the best healthcare systems in the world to help people with the, diseases that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And amazing technology, in vitro fertilization to provide babies for couples who wouldn't have had children.
Right.
Surgeries, heart surgeries and face, transplants and hand transplants. And yet there's a lot that happens in our life that's preventable.
Mm-hmm.
And what as I said, I get so excited about prevention and survivorship. Mm-hmm. And so I went on this quest to try to understand better, how diseases form, how cancer forms, and is there any way that we can prevent this so that we can prevent some of the pain and suffering, that happens. And, I don't have those answers. It's still mysterious. However, I feel like there is enough that we know today to help parents to become educated consumers with choices, so that they have better choices in their life.
What would you recommend, for instance?
Well, the first thing I would recommend is know your family. Know your genetic background. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out and have a genetic test, but, ask your relatives, ask your mom, ask your grandparents, what things did people have?
Right.
So that you have a better idea of how to individualize your life to hopefully, keep yourself as healthy as possible for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things are so simple, It's not complicated. And the phrase that I like to use, it was kind of an acronym that I came up with because I kept thinking about this. And wellness, I think, is a good acronym.
Mm-hmm.
Standing for working every living day towards love, nutrition, exercise, serenity, and spirituality.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. So how would you do that? Well, love, right?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds really simple to have positive relationship with yourself, your family, your friends, your colleagues. But I see so many people every day who are doing things to their body because maybe they don't believe they're good enough, or they, grew up with certain habits, and so they just continue with those habits of smoking or, whatever, that are negative and really hurt their bodies and, impact on their health. So, having that positive relationship. Nutrition, eating wholesome, organic as much as possible. There's nothing totally organic today, but try to eat organic as much as possible. The colorful fruits and vegetables, whole grains.
Right, fresh whole foods.
Yes, nuts. And believe it or not, what the studies are showing, more important than the diet is our weight. that a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the cancers are related to overweight, such as breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer. So trying to get to your ideal body weight or know what your set point is, because we all have different set points. You know, for some people who are 5'5", maybe 115 works best for them. For others, 135 may be where they feel their best, their most energy, they're most alive. So figure out what your set point is and work towards that.
And of course, that's going to happen naturally if you're eating the fresh whole foods.
Right, exactly. And then exercise. So the other thing the studies show is that more important to get the weight down than our diets, because a lot of times when people are trying to reduce their weight, they're thinking of, oh, I got to starve myself, I got to limit my food intake. More important than the food intake is the exercise. And when people can exercise on a regular basis, it will bring the weight down better and, you know, on a more steady state so that they can keep the weight down. So find out what your passion is for exercise. You know, for some people it's walking, for other people it's skiing, for some people it's bike riding. You know, just find one thing and just do it.
And you're so right about finding your passion, because that's what you'll keep going on.
Exactly. And then oftentimes you'll network with other people that have that same passion, so they'll inspire you to keep going. And then the other, you know, the serenity, you know, find your bliss. And, you know, try some sort of stress management, whether that be meditation, yoga, qigong, tai chi, and, you know, sometimes you have to experiment and figure out which one speaks to you and works for you, and then just keep doing it on a regular basis.
Well, I really appreciate you giving us such wonderful advice, and this has been fascinating. Everything from the epigenetics to the practical things you can do in your life for prevention. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I'd love to have you back again.
Thank you.
For more information on Aurelie Cormier, you can visit our website at beyondcancersurvival.com. You can also find Beyond Cancer Survival on Facebook. For more information on the Marion Institute, you can visit them on the web at marioninstitute.org. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Sheryl Worthington Turgeon. See you next time on Living Healthy.